will endanger our future if we don't do our work in this room collectively, do it well. And just as importantly, we'll squander an opportunity to create millions of good jobs, the kinds of jobs our families and communities need, rebuilding the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the transit systems, the electrical grid, the water and communication systems, all those things that we need to avoid the worst risks of climate change and prepare for those that we're already experiencing. So the purpose of this panel is how do we best communicate that shared vision of how to create good jobs in a clean environment in your community? How do we build a movement that breaks the perceived notion that we have to trade off environmental protection for economic development? And how do we manage the 10% of things we disagree about so that they don't undo the 90% of things that we do agree about? And most importantly, how do we turn a commitment to work together in principle into a strategy to win real change? These are the questions that we've asked our panelists to discuss this afternoon.
Where we issued a document that is still out there and can get on our website called Our Children's World. And in that document, one of the things we said in 1990 was that global warming was going to be the most important environmental crisis that we would face in our generation. And rather than it become political suicide, the chairman of our committee, George Becker, became our president, and I followed in George's footsteps. So that our union has had a long, proud history of being at the forefront of recognizing the problem. And one of the things that we want to think about now is to take advantage of the most unity we can bring about. I feel very strongly that the environmental movement can't do this by themselves. The labor movement can't do it by itself. Probably the environmental movement and the labor movement still can't do it by itself. We need the support of all kinds of progressive groups, people that are concerned about the future. And we need to do this in a way that actually creates jobs. The biggest challenge we have is when we come out into the environment, the political environment and the institutional environments, where people can come out and with some measure of credibility attack us that we're doing away with jobs. That becomes a very high hurdle. But I think we can actually put together a program that I believe fundamentally in the long run is going to have more jobs than we have now. And as I was growing up, and that's a big part of why I wanted to, and our union wanted to be a part of the foundation, the formation of the Blue-Green Alliance. All the time that I was growing up in this town that I grew up in, the city that I grew up in, the polluting employer would always say to us in the union, look, you can't have good jobs in a clean environment. Either or, pick one or the other. And we continued to fight them. And as we made the place cleaner, not only we have good jobs, we have better jobs. The air was cleaner, the water was cleaner, you could actually run track and win some without sucking in sulfur. We could do all those things. There's a lot of challenges that we'll have. We won't always agree on every item, but 90% of the time we will agree. And one of the things that I think we need to do is we need to go after the low-hanging fruit. We need to go after the low-hanging fruit that's going to create jobs. And we have a message that we can bring forward. More than 50% of the schools in America are more than 60 years old. That means they're energy inefficient. They're probably not the cleanest place for sucking in the air that our kids would breathe. It's not the best place to have a learning environment. There's millions of jobs in retrofitting schools. Most of our public buildings are more than 50 years old. There's huge jobs in retrofitting those public buildings. There's industrial retrofitting that we could do. We're going to have all kinds of debate about a certain pipeline. But we got 2.5 million miles of pipeline in America, of which more than 60% is more than 50 years old. So both at the Blue-Green Alliance last board meeting and at the AFL-CIO, we adopted a statement on retrofitting those pipelines to the current scientific standard. If we do the same thing in buildings, if we understand that in the foreseeable future, we're going to have to start to extricate ourselves from the level of fossil fuels that we use. And I think the public is on our side. So there is no debate amongst people with half a brain. Global warming is here. Our challenge now is, can we hold it from going forward and can we push it back? I think the alliance between the environmental movement and the labor movement, and broadening that alliance if we need to, gives us a chance to do that. And I'm extremely proud of the labor movement. I'm extremely proud of the environmental movement that have come together to create the Blue-Green Alliance. I yak at Dave a lot. Quit telling people we have 15 million members because we haven't figured out how to get them activated yet. Let's get them activated and surprise the shit out of everybody.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael Brune, I'm the Executive Director for the Sierra Club. And maybe as a way of introducing myself, I could let you know that I'm from the state of New Jersey. I grew up on the Jersey Shore. And so growing up, I saw how not only was my quality of life impacted as an 8, 10, 12-year-old who couldn't go swimming in the ocean, whose dad was often out of work because nobody wanted to build homes in a place that was so polluted. But I also read stories about how workers in New Jersey were being affected as well, and how these were folks who wanted a way to pay their mortgage and wanted to be able to feed their families, pay the rent, and they had very little choice between working for a company that violated state laws or took advantage of the lack of state laws, and yet were facing a significant burden of pollution at the same time. So when I came to the Sierra Club 3 years or so ago, I was joining this great institution, largest grassroots environmental organization in the world, a group that had built its record for more than a century at stopping some of the worst examples of industrial development. And in the last couple of years, the success of the Sierra Club has largely been focused on stopping the construction of new fossil fuel facilities or resisting certain pipelines or fracking operations because of their impact on climate change. But when I was coming on, there was this great surge of enthusiasm from Sierra Club volunteers, members, our board of directors, and our staff to be as effective at implementing solutions as we were at stopping things that we opposed. To be as innovative, as creative, as tenacious at creating the world that we want as we were at stopping the things that we had to avoid. And so over the last few years, what we've done is we've invested the Sierra Club membership, we've put significant resources into helping Sierra Club chapters organize in their own communities, to put solar panels up on the roofs of their own houses, up on the roofs of their own businesses or schools or churches. We've been working to extend the production tax credits so that the wind industry has a chance to grow. We've been investing in fighting state by state and community by community for strong efficiency standards so that we can put people to work and cut energy bills at the same time. And we know that this work is hard to do. I really liked what Leo had to say when he said that we can't do this alone. I think that our biggest challenge as collective movements is that often we think that we can do it alone. I know that there are many folks in the environmental movement who think there is an enormous amount that the environmental movement can accomplish if it just works by itself. And I suspect that there are a lot of folks in the labor movement who think working with other parts of the progressive sector, working with other movements could be good, but it's not necessary. We don't really have to do it. And I think a lot of people might believe that if the labor movement just fixed itself or strengthened itself, that it could accomplish more. I think that's our biggest danger, is that there's this illusion, there's this allure of self-reliance. Because I think that we could accomplish a little bit if we stayed within our own silos. But the goal here is we don't want to slow the rate at which things are getting worse. We don't want to slow the rate at which warming takes place or slow the decline in labor across the country. We actually are fighting to win. We're fighting to have significant impact on all of the issues that we care about, whether it's workers' rights or whether it's promoting strong environmental policies. And so we've been really excited over the last couple of years to be partnering, doing trainings with CWA, led by Larry and George and others down in Florida and Texas, here in Virginia as well. We've been excited to be part of an initiative to help protect democracy and secure strong voting rights, work on campaign finance reform, to fight the dysfunction in the Senate. We've been really excited to work with students across the progressive sector to build bonds at the grassroots level. And we're very proud of the Sierra Club that we ourselves are unionized.
So first, Dave challenged us at the beginning, why does some change occur and not others? What is it that prevents the change we worked for in 2008? The Congress and President we elected in 2009. Now here we are 4 years later. What is it that has prevented, frankly, any real change from occurring in terms of economic justice issues? And the premise of that is that we have gigantic structural blocks, like permanent blocks, to real change. And that if we work on the issues, we work our hearts out, we show that Hurricane Sandy, as Mike said, was not a fluke, it's science, that when the ocean temperature heats up 1 degree more every 10 years, the same storm is geometrically worse. That's called Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, as Mike called it. And if we're really serious about helping people, and we have a big strike fund that also helps our members in relief, and thousands of them, because 25% of our membership was in the path of that storm, had their homes devastated, like Mike's parents. But, frankly, that's not really how we help those folks. We help those folks when we take up the challenge that Leo stated, that every scientist who works on this in this country, virtually everyone, will tell you that if we continue to burn fossil fuels at this rate, the temperature of the Earth is going to continue to go up 1 degree every 10 years, and it is going to destroy everything else, including even the workers' rights that I spent my entire life on. So that's point one, to go back to Dave's frame. Some change, but not others. Point two is that workers' rights now, by every measurement, is much worse than it was 5 years ago, when we won that election. And everybody in this room, could rattle off the Midwestern problems, like Wisconsin, not problems, devastation in the public sector, passage of right to work a couple months ago in Michigan, right to work for a lot less money. And yet, that devastation was in, at least half the states. So New Jersey, it's not just that Christie is a disgrace when it comes to talking about climate change, or that the pension of your mother is very much in doubt, but he also eliminated, with his leadership, and many Democrats going along with it, it took Democrats, because the Democrats have the House and the Assembly, they eliminated health care as a bargaining issue. No longer can bargain on health care in New Jersey in the public sector. And so many of our members there, we have 60,000 members there, are public workers, and their premiums have gone up $4,000 a year for family health care. And so that's the change we've gotten on health care day for those members. And yeah, there might be some benefits in the Affordable Care Act. But what are the blocks? Why did we start this democracy initiative? What is it? So number one is voters in and money out. Right? We all remember that? 70% of our citizens are registered to vote. It's the lowest of any democracy in the world. People like me and many in this room who have worked for several decades for social change keep working on voter registration. That's exactly where it was when the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. 7 out of 10 American citizens are registered to vote. Anybody know what it is in Brazil? 100%. Australia? 100%. Virtually every other democracy in the world, over 90%. We passed, 30 states passed voter suppression. And then money out. Citizens United. But more than that, the last election in November was $7 billion, up $1 billion from 2008. All of that, Dave, right, as you well know, is why we're not getting climate change, and why right now, for the first time since 1935, we don't have a National Labor Relations Board. That's number 3. There's no other parliamentary body in the world that has rules like the U.S. Senate. Climate change passed the same Congress, the 111th. Never got to the floor. And we're going to have to work together on a democracy movement. As important as climate change is to all of us, particularly the Greens in this room, as important as workers' rights are to all of us, particularly the labor folks in this room, as important as jobs are to every single one of us in this room. We need to raise up these democracy issues. We need to tell elected officials, in this case particularly Democrats, that we're not going to put up with no National Labor Relations Board, that's what we have right now, that we're not going to put up with a Senate that deliberately failed to change its rules again this year, and so the key issues will not even get on the floor. Let's put together climate change, workers' rights, democracy, and let's stand up together and fight back. Thank you.